Have you ever wondered if the shadows of your ancestors' hardships still linger within your life today? The echoes of the past reverberate through the annals of time, leaving subtle but distinctive imprints on our present. This is the unseen legacy we inherit from our forebears. It isn't a matter of mere superstition or folk tales. It's a tangible, palpable phenomenon that, in many instances, shapes the course of our lives. We call these echoes generational curses or traumas. Generational curses, as they are often referred to, are the transference of emotional, physical, or social issues from one generation to the next. They are like invisible chains, binding the descendants to the trials and tribulations of their ancestors. So, while the hardships of our ancestors may not physically exist in our present, their shadows often linger within us, influencing our thoughts, behaviors and experiences in subtle and not-so-subtle ways. Imagine, if you will, the vast expanse of the African continent in the late 15th century. The transatlantic slave trade, one of the most horrific events in human history, was just beginning. Millions of African people were uprooted from their homes, torn away from their families, and forced into a life of unimaginable suffering. The trauma experienced by these individuals was profound, but it did not end with them. Like a stone thrown into a pond, the ripples of this trauma spread outwards, touching the lives of their descendants in ways that are still felt today. Even centuries after the abolition of slavery, the descendants of those who suffered this unimaginable trauma still bear the scars of this dark chapter in human history. The transatlantic slave trade is but one example of generational trauma. However, it serves as a stark reminder of the lasting impact such events can have on individuals and communities. But how, you may ask, do these generational curses manifest? How do they pass from one generation to the next? The answers to these questions lead us deeper into the realm of the unseen legacy, a journey we shall continue in the next scene. Imagine a chain, each link representing a generation. Now consider what happens when a link in that chain experiences trauma. Trauma is not merely a personal, fleeting experience. It lingers, seeping into the core of individuals' existence, coloring their perceptions and shaping their behaviors. And it doesn't stop there. This profound impact of trauma can be passed down through generations like a baton in a relentless relay race. Just as our physical traits are inherited from our ancestors, our psychological predispositions can be too. This includes our susceptibility to the effects of trauma. In essence, the experiences of our forebears, their trials and tribulations, their joys and sorrows, their victories and defeats, all leave an indelible mark on our psyche, shaping who we are and how we interact with the world. Environmental factors also play a crucial role in this intergenerational transmission of trauma. Children raised in an environment marred by the aftershocks of trauma may develop coping mechanisms and behaviors that reflect this trauma. Often, these behaviors and coping mechanisms are not beneficial, but rather a survival instinct, passed down through generations as a way to navigate a world perceived as threatening. Let's consider an example that has had a profound impact on a continent and its descendants: the transatlantic slave trade. This brutal chapter in human history has caused untold suffering and trauma. The descendants of those forcibly transported across the Atlantic carry the psychological scars of this traumatic past. The trauma manifests itself in various ways, from heightened anxiety and distrust to feelings of inferiority and despair. It's a heavy burden carried across centuries, passed on from one generation to the next. In this way, trauma becomes a chain, each link representing a generation, each bearing the weight of the ones before. It's a chain that can bind and restrict, shaping lives and experiences in ways that are often unseen and unacknowledged. Thus, the pain of the past continues to echo into the present, shaping the lived experiences of the descendants. But the echo of trauma doesn't stop at the individual level, it reverberates through society as well. When we delve into the societal impacts of generational trauma, we can't overlook the narrative of the transatlantic slave trade. This dark chapter in human history serves as a poignant example of how deeply rooted and far-reaching these echoes of trauma can be. For centuries, millions of Africans were forcibly removed from their homelands, subjected to inhumane conditions, and exploited for their labor. This trauma didn't merely vanish with the abolition of slavery. No, it seeped into the fabric of society, manifesting in systemic racism, social inequality, and generational poverty that continue to have a profound impact on descendants of those who were enslaved. These societal structures, built on a foundation of prejudice and discrimination, perpetuate the trauma, creating a vicious cycle that is difficult to break. The painful history of slavery is etched into the collective memory of a people, resurfacing in the form of racial profiling, educational disparities, and limited economic opportunities. Think of it as a societal echo that bounces off the walls of our institutions, growing louder with each bounce. This echo is not just a reminder of a painful past, but a constant reinforcement of the trauma, impacting the mental and physical health of affected communities. This generational trauma also shapes the way society perceives and interacts with these communities. It fuels stereotypes and biases that further marginalize and disenfranchise them, adding yet another layer to the trauma. This isn't just about historical events or individual experiences. It's about how those events and experiences reverberate through time, shaping societies and influencing attitudes. It's about recognizing that trauma has a societal dimension and that our structures and systems can either perpetuate or alleviate this trauma. We must also remember that societal trauma, just like individual trauma, can be healed. It requires acknowledging the pain, understanding its origins, and actively working towards change. It's a collective effort, a societal responsibility, to ensure that we don't just hear the echo, but also strive to silence it. As we can see, the chains of generational trauma extend far beyond the individual, entangling whole societies in its grasp. So, is there hope? Can these chains of generational trauma be broken? When we stare into the abyss of generational trauma, it may seem like an inescapable pit, but I assure you, there is light at the end of the tunnel. The chains can indeed be broken, but the process requires understanding, acknowledgement, healing, and profound societal change. Understanding is our first beacon of hope. We must comprehend the roots of our pain, trace them back to their origins. It is only by understanding the pain of our forebears, the struggles they endured, and the wounds they carried, that we can begin to unravel the threads of our own suffering. This understanding is not for the purpose of blaming or wallowing in the past, but for gaining insight into our present condition and how to move forward. Acknowledgement is the next step. We must acknowledge the trauma, not just as personal, but as collective. This trauma is not an isolated individual experience, but a shared legacy passed down through generations. Acknowledgement allows us to validate our experiences and emotions, granting us the courage to face them head-on. Healing, the third step, is a deeply personal journey. It may involve therapy, support groups, or personal growth practices. It's about reclaiming one's sense of self, free from the shackles of inherited pain. It's about learning to love and nurture oneself, fostering resilience and promoting emotional well-being. Lastly, societal change is vital. It involves challenging and changing systemic structures that perpetuate trauma, advocating for social justice, and promoting empathy and understanding at a societal level. It's about building communities that nurture rather than wound, that empower rather than oppress. Imagine a world where we've broken these chains of generational trauma. A world where our children are free to live their lives, unburdened by the pain of their ancestors. A world where they are free to create their own legacy, untarnished by the past. Breaking the chains of generational trauma is not a task for the faint-hearted, but it is a journey worth embarking on for the promise of a brighter future. The journey to breaking generational curses starts with you. It's an empowering thought, isn't it? That you, yes you, possess the ability to initiate a ripple effect of change that could transform the lives of generations to come. This transformation begins with education. Delve into the annals of your family history. Understand the struggles, the triumphs, the patterns that have woven the fabric of your lineage. But don't stop there. Broaden your horizons and learn about the societal structures that have shaped our world. Understand how they influence our lives and, more importantly, how they have perpetuated generational trauma. This knowledge isn't just about understanding the past, it's about equipping yourself with the tools to reshape the future. Once you're armed with this understanding, it's time to take action. Start within your own communities. Reach out to your neighbors, your colleagues, your friends, and begin conversations about generational trauma. These dialogues can be difficult, but they're necessary for progress. Together, you can work towards addressing systemic issues that perpetuate this trauma. Support initiatives that strive for societal change. Whether it's voting for policies that tackle systemic inequalities or volunteering with organizations that provide resources for those affected by generational trauma, every little action counts. You might feel like a single drop in the ocean, but remember, each drop contributes to the might of the wave. And most importantly, show compassion. Compassion for yourself as you navigate this path, and compassion for others who are on their own journeys. Understand that breaking free from generational trauma is not an overnight process. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It requires patience, resilience, and a whole lot of heart. Remember, the past may shape us, but it does not define us. We have the power to break the chains of generational trauma and create a new legacy for future generations. We can't change the past, but we hold the pen that writes the future. Let's write a story that future generations can look back on with pride. Let's break the chains. Let's create a new legacy.